Well, this is another edition of Nuns Around the World, and today joining us is Alex. How you doing, Alex?
Alexander, please.
Alexander, please. I'll call you Alexander, please.
No, doing really, really, really well.
And where are you located, Alexander?
At the moment, I'm visiting friends in Calgary. That's Calgary, Alberta. I live in Edmonton, Alberta, the capital city of our fair province. It's
So
a
you and I met at a conference on the weekend, and we had some great conversations. You're a generation removed from me, so it's always interesting to talk to people like you. Can you tell me a little bit about the background of your family, what the religious environment was for you growing up, and at what point you kind of realized that you were an atheist?
Okay, I can do that for you. Um, my father's side, that is the side that is the DeLormes, very Lutheran, very Lutheran. Grandfather was actually deacon of our church. And so I was obviously baptized Lutheran. It was, I mean, as far as I remember, um, a fairly religious household. I say as far as I can remember because my parents split up when I was just about 8 years old, and so I was old enough to sort of just know that I was religious and a Christian. Like I wasn't, too young to not remember this stuff. Fortunately for me, when my mother got custody, well, my mom's side of the family, not nearly as religious. And so, fortunately, my house actually became rather secular in itself. We would all have called ourselves Christians, but, once I moved from Edmonton, where I was born, and where I'm currently living, to Lloydminster, which is an even more redneck small town in Alberta, uh, religion, oddly enough, is just more prominent in the city of Lloydminster, but in my house it went away more or less. And so, although I would have considered myself a Christian until I was 16, it didn't have a terrible, terrible impact on my life then. Anyhow, once at that point I decided that I was no longer a Christian, it had some real ramifications. I'm actually not invited to any Thanksgiving dinners on my dad's side of the family anymore. So that is unfortunate. But how I became an ex-Christian around 16, 17, uh, I sort, I suppose I just sort of started out as a cliche, honestly, because I really was just that person who is angry with God. I had a bit of a rough streak. Some unfortunate circumstances befell my family, and so I was really actually just angry with God because I did truly believe. I did think, why is this happening to me? This is not what a just God would do. Like, you don't love me, you know what, right? And so I really did, being my angsty teenage self, try to look up on the internet, great resource, uh, other people that might think the same as me to find some solace there. And then, of course, after a while, I had to stop hating God because I just realized I had no reason to believe in Him anymore. Um,
So what age are we talking?
right.
This is at what age?
I was 16. I was 16 when I became cynical about God and um, not an atheist. But at about 17 is when I really just didn't believe in God, and then became cynical about religion as a whole. Right? It didn't happen simultaneously. I sort of was angry with God and still believed, and then didn't believe and thought this is benign enough, and then with further research decided for myself, no, the religious mentality is a harmful one.
Right.
So it was a series of steps for me, and I did start out as the cliched sort of angry, not yet an atheist. Yeah, yeah.
So in that about a year or so span, what was the key? What was that one final piece that made you
Okay.
went, I'm got to use the A word now?
Okay, okay. Um, as far as just not believing, I'm not sure if I really had a specific trigger. I know actually found sort of an atheistic worldview through first looking at LaVeyan Satanism, which is actually a very well, lesser known but sort of backwardish, cultish, obviously sort of thing. But their tenets are absolutely atheistic. It's not devil worship. They actually use Satan in the Hebrew sense, uh, in the well, yes, anyhow. And so that got me exposed to just an entirely different mode of thinking, which, because it's relevant to them, is very sort of self-oriented, very, well, you rely on yourself. You don't look at spiritual pipe dreams for guidance, or you don't set your goals around them. And so that sort of got me thinking that, yeah, I can make it in this world without God looking over me. Upon, further inquiry, I decided Satanism is just not for me. Couldn't abide by it morally or anything like that. And I think that was actually probably it if I had to pinpoint it, because I was just that was the first sort of method of thought of living without God that I was exposed to. And so I think I'd say that. What helped me become cynical about religion, though, as a whole, rather than just not believing, was just the really good George Carlin joke, of course, which is, I really, really wanted a new bike, and so I prayed and I prayed and I prayed for one, and I never got it. Then, of course, realizing that that's not how God and religion works, I instead just stole a bike and asked for forgiveness. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I had already, I would have considered myself an atheist at that point, but sort of that realization that's embodied in that joke, that's what made me cynical about religion. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of putting you on the spot, asking you to pinpoint that one spot because
Yeah, it's
I can still remember being that age, and I don't have the vocabulary or the ability to put these philosophical ideas into a sentence for anybody, right? Even myself, it wasn't one thing really. It was more of a feeling, a hunch, that nagging, prickling doubt in the back of your head that just grew and grew, right?
That's right. Yeah. No, I think I'd agree. Yeah.
So, how you spoke of some of the reaction that your family members have with your atheism now.
Yeah.
What, when you back a couple of years ago up to now, how do your friends react?
Right. Because you're right, it is still fresh in my mind. I'm only 21. Uh, they, for the most part, fairly negative. You do sort of find out who some true friends are. Uh, I wasn't necessarily ostracized for my beliefs in that way with my friends at my high school, but things did change. So, people would just see me with my free reading because how easy is high school? You have time for free reading, right? And my book I carry around is God is Not Great, and everybody wants to pick a fight. Perhaps understandable enough. I mean, I think people have a right to be curious about a book like that, but it wasn't anything like the unfortunate family situation. Even my dad, who uh, is okay with me being who I am, didn't exactly or hasn't exactly backed me up to the rest of my family. So there's some pretty disappointment there. But my friends, for the most part, my true friends, once we got over our differences of opinion, well, we did just that. We got over them. Life goes on. But the community as a whole is pretty hostile, the one I grew up in, anyhow. When my parents divorced and I moved to Lloydminster, which is geographically, something like 300 kilometers east of Edmonton, uh, the community itself is just very, very much against it. Oh yes. So I could never bid myself as an atheist in that community. I really doubt that I could. I know there are some in the community, but of course they could never really come out about it because it's small enough that everybody knows everything that gets around. Because I'm unabashed about my atheism, there are people who know about it, And actually, my editor there at the paper, him and I have had a few discussions because he's a very devout Baptist still. Anyhow, Lloydminster itself, yeah, very redneck, very conservative, very backward that way. So, um, yeah, it's tougher than it could have been somewhere else. Like say inner city Edmonton, where I'm living now. Lots of people that are very accepting of different worldviews and different opinions.
So growing up, safe to say that you were kind of sheltered from other religions. You wouldn't find a large Muslim community in Lloydminster, I'm guessing,
Oh no,
or
no,
you
no,
know.
no. You're absolutely right. Yeah, yeah. Hadn't even really considered it. I mean, I would have only been um, let me think here. I would have only been 8 at the time, but everybody remembers, September 11th. And if you didn't know what a Muslim was before then, well, you know, I, I found out about that, right? But truly, you're right. I wasn't exposed to much because there is nothing else in Lloydminster really. Yeah.
So now that you're an atheist, and there's certain communities where that's not going to be tolerated or necessarily be comfortable for you. There are some issues with family. Where would a guy like you turn to for support? Or
Okay.
you know what I'm saying, that
Yeah.
that bubble is kind of not there, like some other families. What is a guy like you? Where did you go?
I went exactly where I am now. I stumbled upon my university's the University of Alberta Atheists and Agnostics, a club of which I've just recently been elected president. So that's sort of where I ended up. Um, but in terms of high school, though, because that is really when it did start, there wasn't too much. I I had to turn to the internet, find some people of like mind, perhaps that way. I had to take comfort in books that sort of strengthen my resolve, like, let's say, God is Not Great. And I did find a very small handful of friends in Lloydminster that not only, of course, accepted me and got on with living, but shared the same opinions. And so we've, of course, become great friends. One is studying physics right now in Toronto, so that's unfortunate. But like people like that, you'll stick with them for forever if they do help you through that kind of phase. Right now, with this group that I'm president of, my university's Atheists and Agnostics, that's exactly the kind of place though where people can and should turn if they feel like they have to. That I mean, you sort of hit it right on the head with the whole with the bubble thing. I mean, you lose that you lose your church, you lose your community. A lot of people feel that way, and sometimes they're ostracized to greater extents than I ever was, even. And so that's sort of the real purpose of, I think, or at least what should be the real purpose of groups like mine, is letting people know, yeah, you're not alone. You can come here, and we can be friends and have a community. And we might disagree about something like politics or um, ethics philosophy, but no, you're not going to be judged just because you don't believe in God. Yeah,
Very good, Alex. Well, I really appreciate you sharing your story with us today,
of course. No,
and
pleasure.
we'll talk again soon. And I wish you happy travels.
I know we will. Thanks so much, Scott.
Take care, brother.